All over the world, tunnels have been built with unique designs and unexpected purposes, from strange tunnel designs to quirky, one-of-a-kind passageways. Join me for today's video. I'm counting down 15 of the strangest tunnels in the world. Let's start with number 15, the Wisteria Tunnel. If you visit Japan, then I suggest taking a trip to Kawachi-Fuji Gardens. That's because it's there that you can find an incredible wisteria tunnel. Made out of 150 flowering wisteria plants across roughly 20 species, this colorful flower tunnel feels like it's out of a fairy tale. For the best visuals possible, I suggest going in late April to early May, as it's then that this magical tunnel is in full bloom. Number 14, Rogfast. In recent years, Norway's tried to make travel across its dramatic fjords a bit easier. One way they've done this is by creating undersea tunnels. Rogfast is one of these tunnels that's currently under construction. The tunnel was built in Southeast Australia. However, it soon became too dangerous for trains to pass through, and so in 1915 it was closed off on one side to create a reservoir. While this reservoir water was eventually pumped out in 1995, during that time the tunnel was not completely abandoned. Instead, it was taken over by a colony of glowworms, and today these insects illuminate the tunnel like a constellation of turquoise stars. It's walkable when it's dry, and the tunnel still floods pretty frequently, causing some to use canoes to paddle through it. Sweet. Number 12, the Lærdal Tunnel. Built to lower the travel time between Oslo and Bergen, Norway's Lærdal Tunnel was completed back in 1995. It's 24.5 kilometers long, makes it monotonous. After all, it's essentially 20 minutes of blank space. However, the government accounted for that during the construction by recruiting a team of psychologists. These psychologists adjusted the tunnel's lighting levels, designed more gentle curves, and created short, straight sections. A tunnel covered in pulsing, strobing lights that attempt to simulate flying through a psychedelic version of space. The bombardment of flashing lights and colors is accompanied by a rather ominous soundtrack, punctuated by an occasional intonation of English words such as shining star and hell. This makes this 5-minute tunnel ride one of the weirdest out there. Number 10, Portland's Shanghai Tunnels. Of all the tunnels on this list, the ones that may just have the darkest history are none other than Portland's Shanghai Tunnels. Now, while this West Coast city may be known for being one of America's most livable from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, it was anything but. Considered to be one of the most dangerous port cities in the world, it was teeming with illegal activity, and much of it happened in Portland's underground. Now, they're commonly known as the Shanghai Tunnels. They were used for a variety of purposes. On one hand, some of the tunnels were used to keep shipping supplies out of the rain. However, others were used to facilitate a practice known as Shanghaiing is questionable at best. But despite it being a popular part of Portland's folklore, modern scholars suggest that this practice almost certainly didn't happen. And if it did, it was far less common than the stories would have you believe it to be. Instead, it's far more likely that the tunnels were used as housing for immigrant workers, opium smoking, and drinking during Prohibition. And while the city's network of tunnels historically ran from Chinatown into downtown Portland, most of them have since been filled in during various public work projects. Thankfully, some of them are still around and open to the public. One of the most popular of these is the Shanghai Tunnels Tour. Operating from Wednesday to Sunday, they include a historic guide that points out the dark parts of Portland's history, alongside ghost tales of the passageways. Number 9, Guoliang Tunnel. Across the world, there is no shortage of terrifying mountain passes, and Guoliang Tunnel may take the cake for being one of the scariest. Its origin story begins back in 1972. You see, before decided that it was time to connect their village to the modern world. In order to do this, though, the villagers began selling their livestock to raise funds to buy tools and materials. However, the money they raised wasn't enough to buy power tools, forcing them to complete most of the construction with hand tools such as hammers and chisels. It was with these simple tools in tow that they began a slow, arduous effort to create a tunnel. At the most difficult stage, the tunnel progressed at a rate of just 1 meter every 3 days. However, after 5 years, they finally managed to complete it. On May 1st of 1977, it was open to the public. Now at 1.2 kilometers in length, 5 meters in height, and 4 meters in width, the Guoliang Tunnel is tiny, really only large enough to accommodate one-way traffic. It is an absolute nightmare to drive in, filled with twists and turns and dips. It's unpredictable places, and it's famous for being a road that does not tolerate any mistakes. However, you only get to really enjoy them if you're a passenger here. With this problem, that city officials decided to create a massive underground cemetery. To do so, they used the remains of a vast network of ancient stone quarries. Stretching for over 300 kilometers, this network of quarries is massive, and in a small 1.7-kilometer stretch, the quarries were repurposed for use as an ossuary or bone room. A total of 6 million skeletons were transferred here once all was said and done, with most arriving over a short 2-year period between 1785 and 87. In order to get the job done as quickly and efficiently as possible, a system of nightly processions was facilitated. In essence, covered wagons would show up at the cemeteries and collect the dug-up remains of hundreds, if not thousands, of people at a given cemetery. These wagons were then transferred to the catacombs, where they would be blessed by a priest performing the Catholic Office of the Dead prayer cycle. In the earlier years, the bodies would be deposited in a rather haphazard manner, yet this was seen as disrespectful to the dead, and eventually reform came about. Thanks to the efforts of Louis-Étienne Héricard de Toury, the system was, be warned, they're really creepy. Moving on to number 7, Subtropolis. From the outside, Subtropolis doesn't look like much. However, a trip into its interior reveals what may just be one of the most underappreciated tunnels out there. With a total space of 55 million square feet, it holds the title for being the world's largest underground business complex. It's located in Kansas City, Missouri. It first got its start as the Bethany Falls limestone mine. However, by the 1940s, limestone production began to fall off, and in 1964, businessman Lamar Hunt decided that the space would be better used for non-mining purposes. Located 46 meters underground, Subtropolis is a massive grid of 5-meter-high and 15-meter-wide tunnels separated by a series of limestone pillars. Thanks to this grid layout, it has about 16.9 kilometers of paved, illuminated roads going through it, alongside several tax records and federal court documents here, helping ensure that they're kept in optimal condition so they don't decompose. For similar reasons, it's important institutions such as the U.S. Postal Service and environmental protection agencies have homes here, making it a rather important facility for America's national interests. And above all, with about 1,600 people working here as of 2015, Subtropolis is also a place where significant parts of the local population spend their 9 to 5. It is also worth noting that other facilities like Subtropolis exist, however they tend to not be as large. For example, there's an abandoned mine in Butler, Pennsylvania used by Corbis and the U.S. federal government for secure storage. There's also smaller limestone mines that are being looked at by companies with uses such as mushroom farming and crude oil stockpiling being some of the most common planned uses. In any case, if you want to visit Subtropolis, you're in luck, as there's a security detail. It's open to the public between Monday and Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. However, if you want a good reason to be there, you can book a session at Jaeger's, which is a paintball place located in one of the caves. The Union may decide to send a nuclear bomb his way. While this worry was likely overblown, it didn't prevent the construction of a massive underground bomb shelter beneath Beijing. Meant to house all of Beijing's 6 million residents in the event of a catastrophe, it was designed to withstand nuclear, biochemical, and conventional attacks. Now, in terms of design, it was pretty impressive. The complex was equipped with facilities such as restaurants, clinics, schools, theaters, factories, a roller skating rink, grain and oil warehouses, and of all things, a mushroom cultivation farm. There were almost 70 potential sites where water wells could be easily dug if needed, while a series of tunnels connected to the complex to various important sites around the city. In order to protect those inside, it also had very elaborate ventilation systems. Complete with 2,300 shafts, they could be sealed off to protect the tunnel's inhabitants from poisonous gases. There also seems to have been a sense of urgency in the city's construction. After all, the tunnels were built by more than 300,000 local citizens on a volunteer, or in all likelihood, for the people. Prepare for war, prepare for famine. However, the site was closed for renovations in 2008, and ever since, it's remained shuttered off to the public on what seems to be a permanent basis. Number 5. The Large Hadron Collider. So of all the tunnels out there, the one that may just be the most useful to humans on this list is the Large Hadron Collider. Located on the border between Switzerland and France near the Swiss city of Geneva, the Large Hadron Collider was a massive project. It was built over the span of 10 years, and it required the efforts of over 10,000 scientists from hundreds of universities and laboratories across 100 countries. The end result is what is now the world's largest and most powerful particle collider. But first, what is a particle collider? Well, in short, it's a machine that allows two subatomic particles to be shot at each other at super high speeds, allowing scientists to record the impact, observe and analyze the results, and then make important scientific. The temperatures are optimal for these experiments. The collider is generally maintained at a really low temperature of negative 271.3 degrees Celsius. For reference, that's colder than outer space, and it's crucial because it allows the magnets to act as effective superconductors. Best of all, while the facility only opened in 2008, it has managed to facilitate some of the most important science experiments to date. For example, in 2008, the facility was used to create microscopic black holes that allowed physicists to detect new dimensions. Then, in 2012, it made a real name for itself when it detected the long-sought-after Higgs boson, which was crucial in explaining how particles acquire mass. More recently, in 2024, it began work on proving the existence of magnetic monopoles, which is important work since finding these would be an incredible breakthrough. And it's also worth mentioning that despite its importance, it's actually possible to see parts of the facility absolutely free of charge. There's guided tours, exhibition, labs, and science shows, or even public events. An integral part of it, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V leased the island of Malta to the Knights of the Hospital of St. John. Today we know them as the Knights of Malta, and for the price of 1 falcon per year, they were given control over the island. The only caveat is that they had to defend it against invasion, and at this time the threat mainly came from the Ottomans. In 1565, the Knights got their first test when the Ottomans launched the Great Siege of Malta. Hoping to use it as a strategic port, the Ottomans had their eyes on the heavily fortified archipelago. In order to defend against the invaders, the Knights dug tunnels underneath the capital city of Valletta. These were used from everything from food and water storage to troop transport. In later years, though, the tunnels were repurposed. For a while, it appears that they were used as an advanced sewer system, although it was in World War II that they once again really rose to prominence. That's because it was during this conflict that Malta faced a foe even larger than the Ottomans, the Axis war machine. You see, at this point in time, Malta was a British colony. Hoping to control the port and prevent British use of it, known as the Lascaris War Rooms, operation rooms were built for each of the fighting services. It was from these rooms that both the defense of Malta and other operations in the Mediterranean were coordinated. After the war, many of Valletta's tunnels once again became dormant for a while, with the exception of the Lascaris War Rooms, which were used as a Royal Navy and later a NATO base until 1977. However, in 2009, a series of tunnels beneath the city that had been forgotten were rediscovered during an archaeological survey. This sparked increased interest in the old relics, and today, some of the passageways have been open to the public. Number 3. The Bourbon Tunnel. The Bourbon Tunnel in Naples has nothing to do with the famous liquor. Instead, it's a tunnel of French origin with a long, storied, and strange history. From 1816 to 1861, Naples was under the control of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Ruled by the French King Ferdinand II of Bourbon, its origins are steeped in revolution. Two Sicilies was incorporated into Italy. This led to the uncompleted tunnels being left abandoned. However, this state of abandonment wouldn't last for long. That's because in World War II, the decision was made to reopen the tunnels to protect Neapolitan citizens from aerial bombardments. Up to 10,000 people would shelter in the tunnels at any one time. They also left behind artifacts such as children's toys, gas masks, and hairbrushes, and they can still be seen there today. Once the war ended, the tunnels took on a different role. Turned into a dumping ground, they were used to store everything from old fascist statues to impounded cars. It continued to be used in this way up until the 1970s when the tunnel was once again abandoned. Thankfully, this abandonment, much like the previous stints, was only temporary. In the 2000s, the tunnel was restored, and the vintage cars and wartime rubble that were scattered throughout were put on display. If you're interested in visiting here, tours of the tunnels in both English and Italian run every Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, with some extra tours being provided on other days. While the historic walking tours are the most popular, the more daring travelers can opt to. As put by the mystery guest, I've never seen a 1%er just in their car stuck in traffic. Well, and this apparently is thanks to these tunnels. As per the guest's story, these celebrities have different access points around the city that allow them to avoid traffic completely, with Starbucks scattered throughout so they can get their caffeine fix. While many are curious as to whether or not the Achterbahn is real, it simply doesn't exist. As put by Reddit user Neuronomously, the city would have to disclose that it's operating such a thing, and it would need to publicly make available its operating costs annually to the local taxpayers. Underground roads in an earthquake with wealthy people moving through them would have liability issues you can't even imagine. Well, the more simple explanation is that celebrities are on the road all the damn time in LA and have super dark tinted windows as well as low-key vehicles that you don't always suspect. If you truly pay attention though, you can see them all the time. What's interesting about this whole situation is that while the Achterbahn isn't a thing, strange tunnels exist that were apparently used by the authorities. Well, despite the storied past, these tunnels have now been closed off. However, a few still exist and are accessible as film locations or simple shortcuts for city employees. Given LA's long history with tunnels, it is no surprise that the Achterbahn story picked up traction and has been believable. However, the sobering reality is that while some old, decrepit tunnels do exist, celebrities are simply not using them for their own ritzy purposes. Number 1. Derinkuyu. Most cities are located above ground, duh. However, the same can't be said in every corner of the planet, and in 1963 a Turkish man found this out in a pretty wild way. After deciding to renovate his basement, he dug through his wall. However, on the other side he found a secret underground room. After exploring further, he came across an entire city, and that settlement was the lost city of Derinkuyu. It's located 85 meters below ground. This underground